nothing better to do.
Welcome to Season 1, Episode 8 of Nothing Better to Do podcast. If this is your first time, welcome to our hardcore version of a fireside chat. If you are a loyal listener, high fives and welcome back. My name is Sean. I run Another City Records. And next to me virtually, as always, is my dear friend Rich.
What's up? I just had a 5G chip implanted in me.
Whoop, whoop. And we have a very special guest today, an old friend of mine. She sang in the band Kingdom. She sang in the band Eaten Alive. And now she has an awesome new, I don't know what to refer to it is. It is a quote podcast, quote radio show called Marked for Life that you should definitely check out. We have Davin. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you for having me.
I don't know what to I don't know what to call it. If you want to describe it.
Yeah, when people call it a podcast, I'm like, it is not. It is. It's like playing pretend. So it's technically, Marked for Life is technically a podcast because I have it literally on a podcast hosting site called Buzzsprout. But it's done in the tradition of 80s and 90s hardcore radio shows where I act like the DJ and the host. I play, song blocks of different newer hardcore bands. I'm only playing stuff from 2018 or after. And then, I talk a little bit about the bands, where you can pick up their releases and just keep it moving like a DJ. So it's a radio show format in a podcast shell, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know if you've had a chance to check it out, Rich. It's were you on episode 4, Davin?
Yep.
I think I've seen like people mention it, but yeah, I haven't checked it. I'll have to check that out for sure.
Yeah. So I guess we'll start there. Is what gave you the idea to, to put Marked for Life together and make this thing a reality?
Yeah, it was, I don't know. I really very actively try to keep up on new hardcore. And I have a few friends, we send bands back and forth like, yo, have you heard this? Check this out. Let me know what you hear. And I just am like always thirsting for more bands and more people to talk to and more people to like punish with my taste in music, I guess. And I was going through an old shoebox I found full of old tapes, like from when I was a teenager. And I was pulling out these gems and like unmarked tapes. And I was like, oh, what is this ancient tape? And I put it on, and it was this weekly recording, or it was a weekly hardcore radio show that I used to listen to from WUNH, which was the University of New Hampshire. And every week I would record it on this one tape that I had in my hand because I didn't really have many cassette tapes. So every week I would tape over it and listen all week to try to find out about new bands, tape over it the next week. So I think this must have been the very last recording I ever had of this radio show. And I was like, oh my God. So I pop it on, I kick back, and I'm like laughing because there's like these, it's like the late 90s. It's probably, 1999, maybe even 98. And there were some riffs on there like that I hadn't heard that style, like the didn't. Do you remember that?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that super high, like, and I was like, oh man, I forgot when hardcore sounded like this. And they were like it was not sick at all, but it was funny. And then they were like, all right, next up, new band, Turmoil. And I was like, oh shit, this is old. But when I was listening to that, I was like, man, I wish there was something like this now, like a straight up radio show with all the new bands. Like, that's what I would love to. Oh my God, I should do that. And then like very, very quickly, I just put it together. I was like Googling like how to start a podcast, how to rip songs on Audacity, and like hitting up my friends with podcasts, like what kind of mic do I use? How do I connect it? Where do I get it? And then within a week I was recording.
Yeah. I mean, I know you're probably close to my age. I know you're not as old as I am, but
nobody's old as yours.
Yeah. Growing up in the
oldest.
middle of nowhere. Yeah, I am the oldest. Al Quinn ain't got shit on me. Growing up in the middle of nowhere where I grew up in southwestern Michigan. I was close within 100 miles of two major cities, but college radio is a lifesaver, like, or at least at
Yeah.
that time it definitely was. So yeah,
Absolutely.
that's awesome.
Yeah, it was the same for me. So I grew up in rural Maine,
Mhm.
like way the fuck out there. And I didn't really even know, like, because I went to my first show when I was 12.
Oh wow.
So yeah, I was, I guess, lucky in a sense. Like, I went to a Primus concert, and this dude who I think was later in 10 Yard Fight or somehow affiliated with them was giving out flyers to like all the alt kids on the way out, and he was like, "Hey," and I thought he was talking. He probably wasn't even talking to me, and I was like, "Me? You know, I'm like a 12-year-old girl. No one talks to me." And he was like, "Yeah, here, take this flyer," and I was like, "Flyer." He's like, "Yeah, it's a show." I was like, "What's a show?" You know, like, I don't know what's going on. Is that a concert? And then, so I put it in my pocket, and on the way out, he was, you know, passing out flyers again, and he was like, "See you there?" And I was like, "Me?" So I told my dad, "I have been personally invited to this show, and he's expecting me. I told him I will be there." So,
Oh boy.
yeah, that's how I ended up at my first show, which was in a small town in Maine. We had kind of a little scene in the town next to mine, but from 12 to like 16, I had, or even 17, I could barely get to shows because I couldn't drive. I didn't know any people with licenses, and I barely even knew any other hardcore kids at all. So my dad would drive me sometimes, but so in those years where I was like, you know what it's like being a teenager and you get into something, you want all the way in, you want to like drown in it. And I just couldn't even find hardcore. I was like, where is this thing? Like, how do I find more? I need to learn about bands. And then I moved when I was 13. And that's when I was far south enough in Maine where I could pick up the radio show from New Hampshire. And it was totally accidental. I tuned in one day and I was like, oh my God, this sounds like hardcore. This sounds like actual hardcore. What the fuck? Why is this on the radio? And then, yeah, the guys came on and they were like, welcome, W&H, hardcore. Blah. I was like, oh my God. So I was like religiously listening every week, and I would write down all the band names. And that was kind of how I was able to, being so isolated in the country and super young, like find out what was going on. And it was super important, I think, for me because I was so isolated and I wanted to be part of this, what was clearly this awesome thing of hardcore. But this let me feel like I was part of it because I was keeping up. I was ordering stuff. I found out about small record labels, and I could order directly from them. And sometimes they would include notes, and I was like, wow, this is so cool, you know?
Yeah, that's the best thing back when you used to get letters with records.
Mm-hmm. It's so weird to me, like, that the same experiences that I had living like 4 miles outside of Chicago was the same experiences that people had in like rural Maine. Is I was in suburbia, which might as well, you know, in a music scene be the, you know, a sinkhole. I didn't know anything. And I got these like glimpses of hardcore bands, or, you know, bands that like circle jerk type bands where, you know, they're kind of crossover-y, and I'm like, yeah, I get these glimpses of it, but I didn't know how to access and find out any more about it, you know, being so close to the city. And I'm like, and it was hard because you're like, I want this. This is speaking to me, and I don't know how to access it. And, you know we have some younger listeners here. This was before the internet. Like
way before.
Yeah.
So actually, like, on that, you're so desperate for these points of connection. You know, when you're so isolated like that, and in the pre-internet days where it's almost like it's hardcore's like a scent in the air, you know, and you try to follow it and you can't find where the source is, and you're like, but we had a record store in the town next to mine, which was a huge deal when it opened because I'm literally from nowhere. Where I grew up, my road wasn't even paved. Like, I'm from nowhere. So we get a record store, and the singer of the one big hardcore band that we had from my area, which was called Polyglot, which I tell a story about in the first episode of Marked for Life. They were super sick band. Really glad they were my first band. They played my first show. They kind of sounded like really Hatebreed. They covered Integrity. They were very cool. But the singer of Polyglot worked at Bull Moose Music, which was our record store. And so when I realized that, I was like, okay, Dad, I need to go to Bull Moose. And I would just kind of hang out, like touching things and like, what's he looking at? Like, how do I ask him? And I was like too chicken to ask him, like, hey, can you like tell me what hardcore is, please? So I would buy anything that had like a live photo where I could tell it was hardcore on the cover, like the New York Hardcore the way it is comp, like very clearly says hardcore on it. I recognized like the people, like I was like, okay, this is like definitely a show. Got into a lot of bands, but that guy, his name was Jay, I think. Bull Moose had like an employee pick of the week. And when I realized that, I was like, okay, this is my chance. This is my in. So I would buy anything that he put up there. But additionally, there was like this punk dude. And I, like back then, you don't know the difference either between like hardcore, punk. When new metal came out, I also was like, is this hardcore? Like, this is heavy. Is this feels different? Is it? Like everything's confusing. And without the internet to like belittle and make fun of everything and tell you where the boundaries are, they were really loose, right?
Yeah.
At least for me.
Well, and to me personal, I'm sorry. Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. Sorry. No.
I mean, unless you're Freddie Madball, I think that happens to everybody,
Right. Only Freddie.
Yeah, but literally, he's the only one on
pure.
Earth.
And everyone wants to be like, I'm as pure as Freddie Madball, but you're not. So this guy with a mohawk, I was like, he's a mohawk. He's like a hardcore punk guy. Like, he has the answers I seek. And he was a little, like, that guy Jay from Polyglot was in his 20s. I'm, like, literally 12. So I can't talk to him. But this dude with the mohawk is, like, 16. So he's, like, a little closer. Still totally terrifying and seems very old. But eventually I kind of befriend him. He invites me and my friend over to his house to listen to records. And he can tell that she's super shy. I'm the only one who talks. And we would sit at his house and I would be like, okay, I want to see 10 bands. And he'd be like, you can only see one. I will show you one. Which one do you want to hear? And I'd be like, oh my God. Oh no. And I would ask him all these questions like, why do you have patches on your clothes? And he'd be like, okay, I'm going to answer this, but you can't ask anything else. And I'd be like, okay, yeah, okay. And I think he was just like living for us, like idolizing him and seeing him as like the ultimate gatekeeper of like all that is hardcore and punk.
Yeah,
and that went on for a long time.
This kid's probably still using like Manic Panic, and he's like suddenly like, I am a god.
Yeah, well, he's like, I mean, then he was like really cool. I ran into him. So literally years later, I was visiting back home in Portland, Maine, and I see this just kind of like obese, falling apart, like drug addict punk. And I'm like, that guy looks so familiar. We make this kind of weird eye contact. I realized that was him. And then later I saw him on a roof, like throwing beer bottles down at people, and the cops were there. And I was like, oh, well, at least he stayed true, I guess. Kept it real.
Man, you got to give him points for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. None of us have stayed that true to our vision.
Yeah. Do you want to hear like the most embarrassing story about him?
Yeah.
Do it.
So this is again like I don't even think we were 13 yet. 12 was like a very eventful year. And me and my friend, who I'd kind of like dragged into this thing with me, we were like, we thought that if you had a mohawk, that was like essentially like getting like cut in or something to like punk and hardcore. And until you got a mohawk, you weren't really part of it. I don't know why we thought this. So we walked all the way from our town, like in the middle of nowhere, to this guy's house and knocked on his door. And we were feeling like super brave. And we were like, we're going to get mohawks. And we also thought that you couldn't just give one to yourself, that the only real way to get a mohawk was for someone who had one to give you one. This is like 12-year-old logic. We're literally, I don't even think I'd had my period yet. Like I'm a literal child. And so we knock on his door and he was like, hey, what are you guys doing here? I was like, we want mohawks. Can you give us mohawks? And he looked at me, and I remember he was kind of like, I don't know. And what he said, and I'm not even kidding, it sounds like it was out of a movie. He says, do you promise to stay true to punk till the day you die? And I was like, absolutely, yes, I do. And he was like, I don't think you're ready yet, and shut the door on us. And we were like, oh my God, oh no, it's so humiliating. Yeah.
Oh man, was it going to make you swear on like a Ramones 12-inch?
Yeah, right? Like it was like so stupid. And yeah, I waited. And then when I was 30, I was like, I still want a mohawk. I'm just going to go get one. So I finally did get one.
So earlier you said you were going back and listening to the old tapes that you recorded from that radio show.
Yeah.
It's funny because with this show, some of the guests like are people that Rich is friends with or Rich knows and that I'm not familiar with. So I'll go back and like listen to to bands that I didn't know of from a different era. And it is like, it's such a time warp because you don't, I guess it's kind of like watching yourself get fat, and you're like, you don't realize it until you look at a picture of yourself from long ago. You're like, whoa, what the hell happened? It's like, you don't realize how hardcore has changed with time, you know, because the things that you listen to that are old are so ingrained into you, and then you gradually started listening to newer stuff. So when you go back and listen to old stuff you didn't know, you're like, what is this? What's going on?
And sometimes it's like, oh, I remember things being so cool, or so, especially when I think back to things being so heavy, I'll be like, oh, this is the heaviest shit ever. Here we go. And I listen to it, I'm like, what the fuck is this? This isn't heavy or hard. This is just bullshit. I liked this.
Oh yeah. It's so weird. Like, you know, just going back sometimes and listening to the things that you used to listen to before your taste sort of evolved when you're just getting into it, and you're like, oof.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for real.
So then how did you get from being a 12-year-old in rural Maine, knocking on somebody's door, asking for a mohawk and pledging your allegiance on the punk rock Bible, to being in Philadelphia and playing in Kingdom?
So Maine is really beautiful and serene, and people love it for that. But when you're like a kid growing up and you're into like hardcore, it's basically like the worst place you can be. I mean, we did have a lot of shows. We had a really big scene. And when I was 16, I got to move to Portland, which is a small city. And we had a raging scene, and I started setting up shows and stuff, and that was super fun. But I still was like, I want to be like in a real city. Like, I got to get the fuck out of Maine. Also, there's 8 months of winter, so I was like, not about that. Never was. Couldn't wait to leave. So I turned 18, and I was like, okay, I'm going somewhere. And yeah, I just kind of wanted to see what, you know, I'm like friendly. So I was like, I want to meet everyone, and I want to go everywhere, and I want to go to places that I can't imagine. And so I thought, okay, what's a place I can't imagine? And I made a list. And I went to like Little Rock, Arkansas, Albuquerque, New Mexico, places that were like, are they even real? I don't know. I'm in Maine. I can't even imagine that as a place. And I bought a series of one-way tickets on the Greyhound to these places so that I could see them. And there was this thing back then called Book Your Own Fucking Life. It was was it more hardcore? I feel like it was kind of more in the punk. The hardcore punk and punk side of things.
I mean, it serviced just like MRR did at that point, in my opinion, at least. Like, it serviced every little subset. I would say that most of the like contacts you would get out of Book Your Fucking Life were bunk, but like, unfortunately, but it serviced everyone to one degree or another, I think.
And I guess for people listening who don't know what it was like a zine, and it was broken down by state and city of people who booked shows. So if you were a band, you could like literally send them snail mail or call them on the telephone. And they also had a list of like people you could stay with, like people you could crash with if you were passing through town. So I called a bunch of people, and from that, and I was like, called Little Rock, Arkansas. And I was like, hi, my name is Davin. I'm from Maine. I'm straight edge. I'm vegan. I'm very respectful. I was wondering if I could crash with you. I'd love to hang out and see your city. And they were like, yeah, okay. So through Book Your Own Fucking Life, I like booked myself like a adventure across America, I guess, when I was 18. And I still keep up with some of those people, which is kind of crazy. And eventually landed in California. Tried to get an apartment in Santa Cruz because I was just really tired, and it was warm there, and it was like the most opposite of Maine that's possible. Too expensive, couldn't go. Ended up moving to Eugene, Oregon. Literally got off a bus to see a friend from Maine, and I was like, fuck it, I'm so tired. I'm gonna just live here, whatever. I grabbed a newspaper, circled a house, and like moved in later that week. And I lived there for like a little less than a year, but it was awful. There was no hardcore scene. It rained all the time. Terrible. And went back to Maine, and then picked Philly off a map. Again, totally random. I was like, what's in Philly? I wonder what's there. I'd also lived in Richmond, Virginia, kind of the same thing. I was like, what's Richmond, Virginia? Moved there. I thought there were going to be palm trees. That's how little I knew about it. And I was like, this isn't tropical. Isn't this the South? Yeah, I lived there for like a year and a half. And it was really cool. I still have lots of friends there. I go down quite a bit. And yeah, moved back to Maine and then did the same thing with Philly. Didn't think I'd stay because I had so far a history of not really staying anywhere. And I ended up here, and I just really like connected with the city, with the people, with the scene. Just everything felt right. And I've been here since 2004. And when I moved here, some friends and I wanted to start a band. We had like a very purposeful idea of starting like a very hyper political, super vegan, straight edge band that was going to tour a lot. And so we went in with that intention, and in 2006 recorded a demo and immediately went on a 2.5 month long tour. And then we kept going till 2012.
And, you know, you guys had, you know, put out records with some very successful labels like New Age and Eulogy and, you know, which right off the, was it, you know, how did you connect with those folks, or did they just see your tour hustle, or did you send them demos? You know, what put you on those maps?
I don't know. Yeah, I think they hit us up. New Age right away, which was pretty crazy. Because we had this like really atrocious demo out. I can't even listen to it. It's super embarrassing. But yeah, we had this demo out, and then they contacted us, and we were already on a tour in Europe when it came out. We were touring on a demo in Europe, which was another one of those like we got hit up, and somebody, booking agent there, said, "Hey, we have this tour set up. We think you'd be good for it. The band that was supposed to play from the U.S. dropped. Here are the dates. All you have to do is show up. Yes or no." We were like, "Yep, yep, we're doing that." So we were like, we're out there just touring on a demo, and in Europe they make you play, which you probably know, like 40-minute sets or something. So of course we didn't have enough material, so we played like all our demo songs and then like a million cover songs just to like take up the time. And in that time was when our New Age 7-inch came out, and they had to mail it to us there. And then Eulogy, I think, was another one of those. They just hit us up and signed us for, I think we had like a three record deal. We ended up kind of leaving that just to go to a label that wanted to do vinyl. And we put out our last 7-inch with Dead Truth, which is my friend Pete from, he's in Ether now, but he was in Remembering Never at the time.
Yeah, I remember when the whole Eulogy thing, not doing the vinyl. We briefly talked about putting the vinyl out on Spook City, but I think at that time, like vinyl was like, you know, as far as hardcore, it was not nearly as popular as previous, you know, time periods, or as it is now.
Yeah, vinyl is definitely in a renaissance now, which I think is great, because I think like vinyl's always been big in punk, and then it kind of fell out in hardcore. And I think as hardcore kind of comes back more into being kind of like a more punk ethic, maybe aesthetic, I'm not sure, that vinyl's getting popular again.
I don't know. It's weird. It's, you know, you look at formats of music, and 8-track was terrible. Like, it really was. I mean,
but now you can get Integrity 8-tracks.
I actually own them all, and my wife looked at me and she goes,
"Oh my God!"
She goes, "Why?" And I was like, "I don't know, because I'm a collector and I just have to." And you know, I'm like, I don't own an 8-track, and I'm probably just never going to take them out of the package. It's just going to sit here. But like the CDs, like at the time were fun, but like I don't know. I think that was like a phase. But vinyl is great, is a physical music collector, you know, or somebody that enjoys it, because you literally, you're holding the artwork, and it's a big size. It's like a display size, you know,
right?
And you've got the big lyrics, and you pull them out, and you know, you read through them. You can't do that with an MP3. You know, sure, I'm in my car, I'm driving around listening to things, but you know, I like to read the liner notes. I like to read what people have to say. I'm old and I forgot, but I just got a record, and there was like a mini zine in the record, and I'm flipping. I'm like, this is amazing. I love this. You know, something for me to look at while I'm. You know, I think people like that. They like tangible things. You know.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I love vinyl, and I also think like with hardcore, I'm so interested in the lyrics. And when I was listening to a CD, or especially an MP3, I'm like, what are you even talking about? You know, like, what if it's something really fucked up? Like, I need to know what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'm terrible with like listening to people's lyrics and knowing what they're saying. I have a 6-year-old daughter, and it's like she listened to like Megan Thee Stallion, and I have no idea what she's talking about. And I'm like that with hardcore unless I read the lyrics. I'm like, I don't know. So
Yeah.
I have to check them out because, like you said, somebody might be saying something sketch, and you're like, gotta be careful about
Right.
that.
Or something that's like really inspirational, you know? Like I feel like most of us base our lives on
Way to be
things that we've heard in lyrics.
Way to be glass half full.
Yeah. Well, like
You ruined it now.
I think I'm sorry. No, it's terrible. Everything's terrible. Hey, hardcore. But I do want to say we've talked a lot about like older hardcore and being old in hardcore, but I personally am like so super excited about what's going on right now, pandemic aside. I think that for the last few years we've been in like this new golden era of hardcore. I think it's probably my favorite, maybe since I got into it. And even then, I think I probably was only as excited then because it was new to me. So this might just be my favorite era that I've been a part of in general.
You know, I'm not going to disagree with you. I've gone back, so I never stopped listening to new stuff, but personally, I slowed down listening to new stuff. I went back to school, so I wasn't going to as many shows. It was harder to find new stuff, but I started this new label, and I'm always scouring for new bands, and I'm listening. I'm like, especially during COVID, I think, is people have had time to just sit around and write music, or there's these one or two person project bands that are awesome. Like Rich, you'll have to remind me, what's the John Caution new band that?
I actually have it right here. I think it's called Jackhammer, but I'll double check.
John Caution from Weekend Nachos has this new band that's like a project band that's super good, and like all these people just doing project bands, and I'm like, man, there's so much good stuff that I'm constantly, and Rich and I will start sending each other things, and not just in the United States, but there's so much good stuff coming out from around the world, and you're like, man, this is hardcore is awesome right now.
Sawblade. Sorry.
Sawblade. Yeah, that's it.
Yeah.
Good name. There's also that band Rated X. I don't know if you've heard them.
I heard
from England.
The last episode.
Yeah, I heard them on and they're super good.
Yeah, the dude from Violent Reaction. It's like a solo project, which I didn't even realize. I was already like, oh, this band's so sick. Wait, and I was doing the research to be able to, speak to it and tell people about it. And I was like, wait, this is a one-person project? Crazy.
Have you heard Slant from South Korea?
Yeah.
Yeah, I played them on the 3rd episode. Yep. They're great.
Yeah, that's super good.
Great band.
Yeah,
there's
international. Oh, sorry.
Oh no, I was just gonna say there's a lot of good stuff happening right now for sure.
Yeah. There's like a French band called Bombardment. That's super good.
Okay.
There's a bunch of good things from France. So yeah, it's such a cool thing to to hear music not just from the United States but worldwide.
Yeah, and I think like international hardcore really historically hasn't got a lot of attention or like positive attention from people in the US. And I think in the last before the pandemic, it was already changing and there were a lot more people paying attention, but especially through the pandemic, I think as we all have time to kind of like sit with our thumbs up our asses and be like, what should I do? What should I listen to? That people are really taking the time to like listen to and finally like give these bands the proper respect, because there's so many fantastic international bands. And I think like there's kind of this misconception that hardcore bands in other countries like don't really get it, or they're kind of like wacky. I've heard people say that a lot. And I think that's just, so are bands in the US. Like there's so many bands here that don't get it, or they're kind of wacky or embarrassing. So like that's not unique. But there's also like all these incredible bands that are finally getting their due. I think, which is cool.
Yeah. Well, and I would say that people who say things like that have a very narrow conception of what hardcore is to begin with. A lot of times, if you have some band from, I don't know, fucking Slovenia trying to be Biohazard, yeah, it's probably going to be weird and something's going to be lost in translation. But I don't know. It's just, I think a lot of times people get kind of narrow-minded about that stuff.
Right.
I think the one, silver lining of this whole COVID year plus lockdown is, yeah, I think a lot of times people were like, well, I'm never going to see that band live, so I don't want to check them out. And I think people now that nobody can see any band, you're checking out. It doesn't really matter where they're from or if, because you're not seeing anybody. And I think that's kind of been a positive takeaway because, you know, you look at non-US hardcore and a lot of Americans just previous years, like, I mean, when I ran my old label, I was like, man, I can't put that out. Nobody's going to buy that here. And,
right.
You know, and now you're like, well, I think I could, because people are actually starting to change that tone and being open-minded about where they're from or, you know, not being able to see that band live probably. Like I probably will never see Slant live unless they post something online.
I bet they'll come over. I feel like they're getting so much hype there. I think if they can, one day they'll be here. That's just my guess.
I agree.
I also want to shout out this band Stiff Meds from London. They are so good. I played them on one of the episodes. They're one of the newer bands that I have like on permanent rotation, and I can't wait for them to come tour here. They're like fast punk. They do like super blast. Like they have like the most insane drummer ever. So it's like nonstop, like Napalm Death blasts. And then they just stop and it goes into these like, what reminds me of like early Lock and Out riffs, like some Righteous Jam breakdown. And you're like, wait, what? And then they go back to blasting, but it works really well.
There was a band that you played on episode 4 that I sent to Rich, I don't know, maybe 2 months ago, called Scowl. And I'm super into that band.
Yeah, so good. Yeah.
And I'm like, I've messaged them. I'm like, I desperately want to put out a record for them. Like, they're so good.
Yeah. Yeah, they're great. And I mentioned this in the episode, but like their art and their sound are so contradictory. Like they have this the really
flower.
bright, happy flower. Yeah. And then they sound like a more punk kind of sheer terror. And I'm like, weird. But it's cool, you know?
Yeah, it's funny because I'd written the name of the band down because I heard a song. I'm like, and I was trying to find them. I'm like, oh, it's not them with the flower. I'm like, I'm looking, then I'm like, wait, it is the band with the flower. That's weird, but they're so good.
I love that they're the band with the flower. Yeah.
You know, a few years ago, you had started a band called Eaten Alive, and that band again, like, I mean, I loved Kingdom, but I thought Eaten Alive was even better. And
thank you.
You know, how did that band start coming about?
Yeah, I'm kind of, I don't know. Kingdom was like such a stressful time in my life. We were a band, I think, kind of at the wrong time. Like the scene wasn't very receptive to politics, like political bands. They weren't receptive to women in hardcore really. And I knew that going in, but it just really took a toll after, you know, so many years. And then I took a break for a while. I went to college after Kingdom, and toward the end of my time in college, some friends of mine, some of my best friends in Philly, my friend Max, who I met, I think the first week I moved here in 2004, and we'd been like super tight since. He was like, hey, I've got this demo. I'm doing this band. It's called Eaten Alive. Do you want to sing? And I hadn't even heard it, but I was like, yeah, absolutely. Like if it's with you, of course I want to do it, you know? And then he sent me the demo and I was like, oh shit, this is actually good. Sick. So I recorded the demo with them. And then, we stayed a band from 2015 to 2017, and we were able to record a full length. And we were actually supposed to tour. We were going to go on tour in Europe with Wisdom in Chains in 2018, but that didn't happen because Max passed away at the end of 2017 and we broke up.
Yeah, that was such a tough time. Max was a really good dude.
Yeah, he was awesome.
I mean, you were much closer with him than I, so it's I can't even imagine.
Yeah, it was intense.
And but you know, you released the record, you know, after it came out after he passed, didn't it?
Yeah, it was supposed to come out a little bit after that, not that long after, but it was kind of like a rush release to be a fundraiser for his family for the funeral. So that's how that ended up coming out. And it was really weird because everyone was focused on, I don't know. Actually, I don't think I can talk about this. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
That's okay.
So, you're doing the radio show, the radio show now. Have you thought about dipping your toe back into doing another band?
Yeah, actually, I have a new band. We're called Dread LLC. And we were supposed to play our first show a week after lockdown started.
Irony.
Oh, God, it might even be the anniversary. I have the flyer here on my wall, kind of sarcastically. It was, April 8th. I don't know what today is. Did April 8th happen already?
That was yesterday.
Oh, yesterday. Yeah, yesterday was the 1-year anniversary of our first show. And today... So we were supposed to play April 8th. We were playing with Rob Brigade, Odd Man Out, Rule Them All, and The Answer in New York. And then we were playing a show today, 1 year ago, in Philly. We're a split band. The rest of the people in the band, the dudes live in Brooklyn. And then, of course, I'm in Philly. So we were doing a first New York show and a first Philly show, which have not happened. And that band is now a group chat with lots of hilarious memes.
Yeah, Rich, you're in Louisville now. Do you remember, did you have any plans around lockdown that got, abruptly canceled?
Yeah. I mean, kind of the same. I mean, none of the things I was doing was close to playing shows, but like I was practicing and kind of making some headway with some friends of mine in Ohio. And then I was in the process of putting something together locally. And yeah, I mean, the thing with the dudes in Ohio, I'm sure will come back around. I don't know if anything locally will happen, but yeah, everything. Yeah, it killed everything.
I was in line to go in to see Avail, and they were just like, "Yep, lockdown is happening right now. Show's canceled." Like there was people inside the venue. They had to kick them out, and there was nothing was playing with Every Time I Die, like 3 miles away. And I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll hit up Nikki to see if he can get me in the show because it was sold out. I was like, that show will be canceled too. I'm just going to go home. And yeah, this was not meant to be. Go home. And then I watch like people's cell phone clips of the show. And I'm like, damn it, that other show happened. And I was like, I don't know, maybe it was I'm like, maybe it was for the best. Maybe that was just like the universe telling me, go home. It's not worth, catching COVID, going to a show.
Yeah, that was like a weird week where we were like, it's not real, into like, oh my God, close the windows, lock the doors.
You know what? I was like, we look back now at the AIDS crisis and how like panic, like don't drink out of the water fountain. And I'm like, that's so weird that there's people. And I'm like, all right, we had COVID and we know a lot more about COVID than we did about like HIV AIDS. And you're like, right. And you just became panicky Pete. People washing their groceries and.
Oh, I did.
I did too.
I was like, I'm not going out on someone that's old sneeze. Like, I'm going to take any precaution I have to.
I'm like, I see some of the dregs that live in my neighborhood. I'm like, I don't want them touching my groceries before I eat it.
Yeah, it was crazy. Like, my partner is from Colombia. And he had gone back to visit his family, and he got trapped down there because they closed the borders. So, we lived together here. And so I ended up being trapped for the first 4 months of the pandemic alone in my apartment. And he was like just stuck down there in his brother's apartment. He was like, oh my God, I don't know when I can come home. And eventually he was able to get on a humanitarian flight back here, right at the point where I was like, I haven't seen another person in 4 months. Like, I'm going to lose my mind.
Oh, wow. Yeah, I remember you post about that. It's like, I didn't realize it was that long. That's crazy.
It was super crazy. Yeah. And it was also like when the protest started, after George Floyd was killed here in Philly, it got a lot of the like arson and stuff that was happening, I guess, like all the fires that were being set. I won't say arson. And the looting was coming further and further. I live in South Philly. And it was coming further down south. I wasn't worried about anything, but then I was like, wait a second, I live on top of a store, and I was like, shit. And it was like 5 blocks away from me or something. And I was like, and they were like smashing things out and things were getting set on fire. And I was like, I have 2 cats. I was like, I think I need like a plan to get out of here just in case something happens to the store below me, because like if it happens there, it's going to happen here too. So I had to like text friends like, hey, I'm totally alone. I don't drive, I have no escape. Like, if something happens, can you come get me? I'm going to get my cats in some carriers. Like, it was pretty crazy to go through by myself, but it was okay.
Yeah, I'm glad you're okay. I remember, God, I don't remember what event it was, but there was some event it's like Greek picnic, when I still lived in Philly, and I lived like 16th and Bainbridge at the time, and this like big event was just outside of my apartment at the time, and like the Rough Riders are out there on their motorcycles going, and it was just, people, you could watch out the window, people fighting and like all kinds of stuff. And I'm like, I don't have any food. Like, I literally have nothing to eat. And I'm like, nobody's going to deliver here. And I'm like, I'm going to have to go out in this. So I'm just like, all right, put on a hoodie, even though it's like 1,000 degrees, put the hood up and just put my head down, and I'm going to walk through hoping, I don't get jumped. But like, actually, it was because it was like the most terrifying thing. It was like, there's just, all these people that are like wilding out. And I'm like, everyone's like, nobody said a word. I'm like, okay. So then I come back and hood up. I'm like, all right, this is okay. We're all right. We're good.
Yeah. I feel like that's like classic Philly. Like, if you don't even acknowledge something happening, like this was literally the other day. I went to get some takeout. Me and my dude were like, okay. And it's on a bad block. And I was like, well, I have, the Citizen app.
Yeah.
You guys have that out there? So I get alerts, there's like so much shit goes down on that block. And I was like, there was already a shooting there earlier today. So the odds of there being a shooting there tonight is pretty low. So let's just like, I was like, I'm pretty sure that's how odds work. So yeah, let's not get delivery because it takes too long. I'm hungry. He's like, yeah, we'll be fine. And I was like, I hate going down there though. Like, it's really bad. And I was like, I'm sure it's fine. I'm sure it's fine. Like, the odds are in our favor. Here we go. And we walk down, and right as we walk like into the point of no return, where like we're in it and there's no escaping that, there's like a fight happening, and this dude pulls a gun and he's in the middle of the street like, fuck you, blah, blah, blah. And we're like just feet away. And both of us, like, you just instinctively know, like, okay, keep your eyes straight ahead, act like literally nothing is happening. And under my breath I said, I don't want to do this. And he said, just keep walking. And I was like, okay. So we just like pretended nothing was happening, looked straight at the restaurant, and these guys were literally outside the door of the restaurant. There were 3 of them, those guys waving a gun around. And then to the right, I heard someone go, yo, 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 it's going off. So, whatever. And neither of us even looked. We're like, I don't know why. I don't want to know what's going on down there. I'm just going to get into the restaurant. So we walk in, and then we like get back away from the windows and just sort of like, yeah, we're here for our takeout. We just had to wait till it was over, but it was fine. You just act like nothing's happening.
I remember.
Keep your eyes straight, pull your hood up, whatever.
I remember, God, it has to be like 10 years ago now. And I was in graduate school and I was studying for my board exams, and my wife is, she was living in she was my then girlfriend. She was living in Boston, coming back and forth. So she was back in Boston, and so it's just me and the dog sitting in my apartment on this like Friday night or Saturday night, and I was just studying for my board exams. And I lived in a really rough neighborhood, and right on the border of it, but still not. And I hear this crash, and my street, it's like Chicago has these big boulevards where it's got like these, grassy medians between the different lanes, and so my street had that, and I hear this crash. So dog and I go running out there. She jumps up barking. And this guy crashed. The median's probably 5 feet high. He's crashed into in his car. His car's just smashed. This airbag's gone off, and I'm like, oh man, this poor guy. And I didn't bring my phone with me. I start to turn to go inside to grab a phone to call an ambulance. Another car comes up, sideswipes it, pulls out a gun, and starts shooting him. And I am. I don't know, the width of a 2-lane street from where it happened. And I'm like, oh my God. And so like my dog's barking. I grab her and like you came out through a gangway, and I run back into the gangway into the shadows. So, they don't come after me. And And the guy just peels off. And I'm like, oh my God. So I come back out there and, you know, peeking, and I'm like, dude, you okay? And he's like, I got shot. And the police and ambulance are there in like a minute. And, cause I guess apparently this had been going on, you know, this had been a chase. So they came, this guy, he's walking down the street and sees it, starts talking to me, perfect English. And he's like, you know, 2 blocks away, there's like a venue where somebody rented out and had a party, and a big fight broke out. And the person that got shot, you know, fired first shots at these people, and then got in his car. The other dudes took after him, jumped onto the expressway, got off on the first exit right in front of my apartment. And that's when that happened. And he's like telling me, he's like, I saw the whole thing. And he's like, I'm just coming up to see this. And, the police shine their lights on this dude, and they're like, what did you guys see? And he just starts speaking fluent Spanish, saying that he doesn't speak English, and then bolted. And I'm like, my man.
Oh my God.
What neighborhood was that, Sean?
It was 290 in Western.
Oh, okay.
That was crazy. Yeah, it's crazy the stuff you see. So I'm actually I'm moving to New York in June for grad school.
Oh, congratulations, by the way. I didn't get to say that to you.
Thank you. Yeah, it's exciting. But I've been in Philly for so long. You know, I've been here half my life, literally. And so I'm like, okay, I'm moving to Brooklyn. I got to like get a whole new, like get the layout of the land. Like, I'm like, I got to figure out what blocks I can't go to and how to like hold myself, and, you know, all the things that you learn, you know, being in a place like Philly, and I guess probably Chicago too. And I was talking to my friends there, and they're like, oh, you're going to like, there's like so little crime. It's so safe here. And I'm like, seriously? They're like, you could walk at 2 a.m. I was like, well, I walk at 2 a.m. here, but like with eyes all over me, basically. So I'm pretty excited to like not have to deal with that. Like, I love Philly for all that it is, but I'm like looking forward to not feeling like I'm going to get shot all of the time.
Yeah, that's a benefit for sure.
Yeah. Like, I straight up had someone try to use me like a human shield in a drive-by here. That actually happened. That was so crazy. I was on the phone with my dad, and I was like, Dad, I'm about to get shot. I'll call you back. And my dad was like, wait, what? He didn't hear me, and I called him back. I said, I'm okay. I didn't get shot. He was like, shot? What are you talking about?
It's luckily he didn't hear you, you know? Poor guy would have been
I know, yeah.
terrified.
Yeah, I'm not going to totally miss that. Also, I feel like anyone who glamorizes violence in the cities and like doesn't see it as a problem has like never had to deal with any of that. You know what I mean? It's like not glamorous, not cool, not anything anyone should have to go through. That shouldn't be like, you know, like everybody laughs about it here, like, oh, it's silly, but like it also everyone's like, oh, that sucks. We have like an out of control murder rate, and you can't go anywhere without someone pulling a gun. Like, that sucks.
Oh yeah, I mean it's like I felt lucky. I bought a house here in Chicago, but I'm in a really quiet neighborhood, and I'm like, you know, those days of not being able to afford anything, you know, and having to live in a neighborhood with a high crime rate, hopefully those are over. And then like literally the other day at 4:00 in the afternoon at Dunkin' Donuts by my house, somebody opened their car door and dinged the other person's door, and the other guy shot him to death. I'm like,
Jesus Christ.
Yeah. And there's like, there's cameras outside, and they have no idea who did it, you know, because it was just at the right angle. You couldn't see the license plate or get a good look at the person.
Yeah.
I'm like, this is like a mile and a half from my house. And I'm like, a little close for comfort here, you know?
Crazy people everywhere.
Yep. Never ends, you know? So don't want to keep you here all day, but, what, you know, obviously people can go check out Marked for Life and see all the stuff you're listening to, but what is one band that you're listening to right now? It could be from any era, any genre, that you think people should check out that they may not have checked out.
I don't know what they see. I think everyone's heard everything, but that's not true. So, because I'm like, oh, I listen to it all the time. You've heard it, right? I'm like, I don't know. But the band that I think I'm probably, it's so hard to choose one, but the band maybe I'm the most excited about, like through and through, would be Ikulu from New York. They sound very like Best Wishes era Cro-Mags. They have like a really kind of down to earth vibe. They seem, I don't know them personally, but they seem really chill. Every show I've seen them play, it's super fun, and they're not like, I don't know, they're not putting on an act, so to speak. I think like the one criticism that people who come from, an older generation of hardcore is like, everyone's pretending, everyone's got a front. And that's probably always been true. It just didn't feel like it. But I will say that I don't get that vibe at all from Ikulu. They seem very authentic.
Yeah, I agree with you. They're really good live, and yeah, they're pretty authentic. It feels like there's not like a whole lot of posturing and tough guy shit or anything. So yeah, I agree.
Well, thanks so much, Davin, for being on the show. I really appreciate your time. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks for coming by.
Fucking wasn't class. Go to the mall with your middle little mess. Break this, fall out your brains. Tired of pretending that we're wrong.